On today's episode of the CLS Experience, we have a very special treat. She's a dynamic entrepreneur, international keynote speaker, and best-selling author of the iconic 2014 memoir, Molly's Game, also turned into a Hollywood blockbuster film, written and directed by Aaron Sorkin, no big deal. She spent years training to become an Olympic skier before getting injured and then creating a mysterious life full of thrills, fast-paced, and high-stake poker games, packed with the world's most well-known celebrities and business tycoons before it all crumbled beneath her. Since then, she's reinvented herself, making a massive impact and contribution to the world from her story, providing inspiration and lessons. She's just a juggernaut in all facets of life and a shining example of grit and vision. Please welcome the exciting, multifaceted, brilliant, and inspirational, magnetic Molly Bloom. How you doing, Molly?
Well, after that intro, I'm doing well.
I did go by you?
That was good. Yeah, can I have that?
I'll send it to you if you want.
Okay.
I always get such a kick out of some of the guest reactions. But like I always like to say, it's your story. You wrote it. I just said it.
Well, you said it better than most. I'll tell you that much.
Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And look, for the audience, we're a couple million now. If you're not familiar with Molly's story, obviously, I highly suggest go read her book, check out her content, go see what she's up to. I think what's most valuable today is we just have an unbelievable conversation. Before we jump around, we're going to get a little weird. You ready for me?
Yeah.
Molly, what's your superpower?
What's my superpower?
Yeah.
My superpower is to be an underdog and still figure out how to get there.
I love that. I would consider myself an underdog as well. You thrive.
Yeah, I think you do. And I also think the more you sort of beat improbable odds, you start to see that it's not an accident and that it's formulaic, and you can start to see what are the factors that contribute to being able to, be successful when all signs and stats point to you're not going to be.
Bang. That's what we dropped the mic, but we're just getting warmed up. Formulaic. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah. I grew up in this family. My youngest brother is an athletic phenom. He was number one in the world at 18 in mogul skiing. Played for the University of Colorado football while simultaneously competing in 2 Olympics. He then went on to get drafted to the NFL. Then he started a charity that blew up, and he founded a software company that he just sold for a lot of money. My middle brother is a Harvard-trained cardiothoracic surgeon at Massachusetts General, but he had this circuitous path where he managed a water park and he managed a bar and started his own company and and you start to see that in these unlikely categories, you figure it out. And so I've really tried to examine what those factors are, both in my own family and other people. And, I think first and foremost is this ability to have some sense of some agency over your own mind. So, I'll give you an example. If you sit around and wait to want to do something, to feel like you want to do something, to wait for motivation, it's going to be few and far between. And so we learned at a young age what my dad called constructive suffering, where you learn how to suffer constructively for what's down the line. You learn how to get up and train when you don't want to train. You learn how to get up and study when you don't want to study. And being able to do that is so instrumental. I mean, as human beings, Sigmund Freud, pointed out something that's just so deeply profound and true. We want to run from discomfort and we want to run towards pleasure. And the more you can start to work on your own mind and that pattern, that habitual pattern, the more I think that you're going to line yourself up for success. So getting some agency over your own mind, I think, is incredibly important. I think that believing in yourself, cultivating a belief in yourself, which is also hard, which is also a lot of times counterintuitive. Having that growth mindset, believing that, you know what, the whole world can believe that I'm not going to do this, but I know that if I put time in and I continue to work hard, that I can build these skills, and that I can cover this ground. And just recultivating that sometimes on a daily basis, I think is incredibly important. I think having a process for fear, it's been said a million times, as human beings, we have fear. It's what's probably kept us, sustained the species. And so just knowing that that's built into you, and sometimes instrumental, but most of the time not. And having that process for walking through fear or walking through doubt, also very important. And then, when you do something, do it with all of yourself instead of just clocking in. Like, I remember we used to go on these family bike rides, and, a lot of times people think like, oh, family on a bike ride, right? This leisurely activity. No, dude, it was like the Hunger Games. Like, and everything we did was like that: chores, athletic endeavors, trivial pursuit in the backseat of the car. Like, we had to bring it. We had to bring our full self. And when you bring yourself like that, like you've seen in the past 2 years with what you wanted to do, instead of just clocking in, bringing it is also, I think, kind of a factor here. I mean, I could keep going on, but I think that those are some pretty important components in this formulaic success that we're kind of talking about.
Yeah, that was straight up dynamite. And I'm smiling right now because the only negative I got going on is we don't have 10 hours to chat. Straight up, like some of the things you said, the constructive suffering. I never heard that before. That's awesome. But also, you come from an environment of such high achievers. Like, wow, talk about expectations and pressure. But at the same time, aren't expectations good, right? Because you hold yourself to that higher standard. And another thing I wanted to acknowledge you for is, I noticed that you're very systematic, like fear and like believing in yourself and do a thing, do it well. Like, you have systems in place to kind of how you operate. Is that right?
Yeah, because I think you have to have systems to upgrade the stock wiring,
Yeah.
I mean, like, all these things that stand in the way of human beings and success, and are all just these just sort of like naturally occurring things in the human brain. And so, like, in anything, in sports, if you think that you can just show up to a mogul ski run and having had no training and do well, like, it's not going to happen. And I think that the mind and mindset and the human condition, if you're not like engaged in some process to level that up, to edit that software, to upgrade it, I think that a lot of people are gonna stay where they are. I mean, I've experienced that many times.
Same. Yeah. It's the mindset is, I think it's literally everything in life.
Yeah.
I started running a couple years back. I have an addictive personality. I ran 4 marathons the first year. But ultimately, one of the reasons why I fell in love with it is because, to me, running marathons was such a metaphor for life, because it's that voice in your head that comes in towards mile 18, 19. It's like, as long as you're physically able, anybody could essentially put one foot in front of the other and go for a run. But it's that voice that you have to combat, right? Whether you want to call it the devil, interference, ego, whatever your cup of tea is you have to block that out so you can kind of stay on track and stay abundant and stay on fire, if you will. And there's a big misconception. Everybody thinks that, like, a lot of people, I should say, think that we're meant to live in scarcity and you have to create systems to try to be abundant, when in fact it's really the opposite. Like, we're meant to thrive and to claim things and do all that stuff, but then we have to watch out for the divider or the ego, all that stuff. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think I agree with that, like, in my bones, because I saw that in the world that I inhabited, and I'm sure you saw it too. Is like, it's so great to aspire. It's so great to have goals, but there's a really important factor that I think a lot of people that are successful miss. And you have to be able to toggle into that, also that content mind, because the more disease is real. And it makes it so that you can strive, you can achieve, and never be satisfied. And I saw that so often, and I experienced that. And so you're just in this constant, like, sort of merry-go-round, and you're chasing the rabbit, and you're never ever getting there. And so, like, there's this really important, that's another thing that comes into managing the mind, this really important place that you have to try to get to, where it is enough, and you can be happy. You can have you can go for the Everest, but you also have to learn how to be happy with the real life, the small moments, and the moments when you're not summiting Everest. And that, meditation, I think meditation is the most profound and most effective mind training tool that I've ever experienced. Probably running a marathon is also, but I'm not going to do that because that voice comes in my head around mile 2. So no, it's just one of the few things that I don't do because of my back, because I'm fused in 11 vertebrae. So there's not a lot of shock absorbers, but I think meditation is this incredible way to train your mind and to be able to overcome yourself over and over, whether it's greed or whether it's laziness, because they're both really toxic, compelling states.
Yeah. Being mindful and present. I mean, being mindful is like a portal to expansion, right? Like, not worrying about 30 minutes from now, not worrying about 30 minutes ago, just me and you right now, this conversation, giving it everything we got, being present. And a good way for the audience, the listeners, to be able to get to that point is by meditation. I've always found meditation so challenging because my mind is always racing. But for me, when I run, it's like a moving meditation for me.
Right. And that's what I was assuming would be the truth for you. So I hate boredom more than anything. Like, and I had no patience when I was younger. I wouldn't stand in line for school pictures because I just couldn't do it. And then my parents would like see the yearbook and they'd be like, "Where's your school picture?" And I'm like, I just couldn't stand in line. So I get that. And here was my way around that for meditation, because I did so much research on it and I saw so much hard science on what it actually does for you. And then I experienced it. But I started so small. I started 30 seconds the first day. So basically the dopamine hit for showing up was way greater than the sort of like effort it took to do the actual practice. And so first day I did 30 seconds, then I built up to a minute, then I built up to 2 minutes. So it became this manageable practice. And I can tell you that, like, before I started meditating, I was an insomniac, super impulsive, couldn't deal with boredom, could not handle the small moments, had to have big moments all the time, adrenaline, like dopamine, like, and after meditating for, I'd say 8 weeks, that I started to be able to make real headway on that.
When was it, Molly?
I started meditation 6 years ago.
Got it.
But it also, like, in a negotiation, it'll make you the most dangerous person in the room because you're not thinking in fear. You've overcome fear. You're not thinking in the future. You're not thinking about the past. You're right there. You're so tapped in to that present moment, and you're not getting taken by those mental states. Like, I think meditation is important for business. I think it's important for relationships. I think it's important for well-being. I just can't say enough about it because it really has transformed my mind.
How often do you do it? Every day?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. In the morning?
I try to, but sometimes with a 6-month-old, that's
understood.
Not gonna happen.
Yeah, but it's so true, like quieting the mind and kind of getting control of your thoughts, right? Because thoughts are random, thinking is not. And right, everybody knows, for the most part, that 90% of the 60,000 thoughts we get over the course of the day are negative, right? So we got to be strategic with the ones that we allow to take up real estate inside our mind, because that will create more beliefs, more empowering beliefs, and a higher vibration, so to speak. And meditation is a really good way to do that.
Yeah, it gives you power over your own mind, and that's where it all begins and ends. Yeah.
I could tell how giddy you get when you talk mindset. Like, I'm like that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I just think it's the keystone. I really do. I think life is and success is a process of being able to overcome yourself, and then overcome outside forces, and I think mindset is just so important. And I was super lucky to have a psychologist father who taught me early on about that, and then great coaches in sports, and then life experience too.
Yeah.
Poker was also an incredibly rich landscape to learn to watch, observe people get taken by emotions
Yeah.
and completely spiral and fall apart.
Yeah. Speaking of poker, how did the whole poker game rabbit hole begin in the first place? Did you know anything about it prior to that?
No, I knew nothing. So I was skiing for the US ski team. I had a career-ending fall at an Olympic qualifier event.
Is that what you're referring to with the back?
No, so when I was 12 years old, I had really bad scoliosis. And so I had to have this crazy surgery where they fused my top 11 vertebrae together and put 2 metal rods in there. And everyone was like, mogul skiing's over for you. And that was kind of the first time in my life I decided to buck authority and to not listen to the experts. And, there would be a long, challenging history of that after that. And so I got back on the mountain and I had to really learn this, like, take it inside, this is your life. You take responsibility for it. And what everyone else says or does is none of your business. And so, then I eventually made the US ski team and it was doing quite well. And then I crashed at an Olympic qualifier event and kind of decided to retire. I was at the University of Colorado. I had just taken the LSATs and done well and was pretty much headed, I wanted to go to an Ivy League law school, but I was really heartbroken after I retired. And so I decided to take a year off and I just wanted to go somewhere warm and be a kid. I'd had this like totally regimented life. Sure. So I decided to go to LA, just wanted to be in the sun, because I'd been chasing winter. Even during the summers, we would go find snow.
That's right.
And I started working for this guy and he had a poker game. And that first night, it was like not your normal poker game. It was, the head of one of the biggest investment banks in the world and a politician who will remain unnamed and, A-list celeb Affleck and, like all these people that move the needle on the world stage. And it was access to this information and capital and power. And I was
captivated.
So and I knew nothing about poker. And then, over the next couple weeks, months, I learned about poker and I was serving drinks and, just being basically like a cocktail waitress at this game. And I started to build this network and see what an awesome opportunity it was. And then I decided that I was going to start my own games at 25 and started the game in LA, and it became the game that everyone played in. Started making millions of dollars a year and having
25 years old.
Yeah. And, sort of really getting access to these people's minds, which was, the money was great, but the access was also, the education was fascinating. To be in a business that was completely unregulated, it was just me. I had to think on my feet. I had to problem solve. I had to figure out, like, people were winning and losing millions of dollars, and it was on me. And then expanding to New York City and running a game that was just a monster. I mean, I saw someone lose $100 million in one night, and I'm the bank for these games, and dealing with organized crime. And, it's just crazy. It was a crazy life. And it was an addictive life because constant adrenaline, constant dopamine, I'm in charge, Yep. It was a trip.
Can I ask you a weird question?
Sure.
How were the New York games compared to the LA games?
Different. LA was, the players in New York were better. The numbers were much bigger. And this was in 2008 that I started these games, that they were playing this big. So you can just imagine, like, how crazy this was to see. I mean, I think the first game I threw was like the president was giving a State of the Union on the economy splintering, and there was $20 million on the table. Just craziness, no big deal. In LA, it was the atmosphere was more fun and more light, and in New York, it was deadly serious at these big games.
Different vibes.
New York was much more dangerous. I had issues with the mob.
Yeah.
More exciting for me, because like
scary, no?
Yeah, no, it was bad. They came to me and wanted a piece of the games, and I was like, I obviously can't do that. I was having games with billionaires that you see on CNBC. Like I wasn't running small games with, with gamblers, hustlers. But they still, they wanted a piece of it, and I turned them down, and they sent someone to my house, and he put a gun in my mouth and beat me up pretty good, and basically was like, this isn't an option, and we know where your family lives, and you can't tell anyone. And I had no idea. For the first time in my life, this was a very dark time, I had no idea what I was going to do. And then it was one of those things, like a couple weeks later, I don't know if you remember this, I think it was in 2010. Yeah, it was they had done this big sweep, the biggest mob related takedown in New York City history. They had to like rent out a gymnasium for processing. And so I guess these guys got either caught up or, too much heat. And so I never heard from them again, but there was no question that this thing was getting out of control.
Yeah.
And then, I started breaking a law that I said I would never break, because it was, for 7 years I did it legally. And then, my debt sheet was getting pretty big. And so I started taking a rake at which means a percentage of each pot that people bet. At some of the games I had more exposure. And so,
so without doing that, everything else was legal up until this point?
Yeah. Yep.
Interesting.
Now, I hesitate a little bit there, because the law that I broke was called running an illegal gambling business. And the language was such that everybody, including all the attorneys that I retained, didn't ever think poker would be a part of this charge, because it said it pertained to games of chance. And you really could make a compelling, strong, accurate argument that poker is a game of skill. But then the decision got overturned in the Eastern District of New York. A new precedent was set. Poker was now part of this felony. And then, what happened, which was the FBI raided one of my games. I wasn't there. I got tipped off, and I'll never forget this. I was like, I need to go to Colorado. This is crazy. So I just like headed to the airport and tried to buy a plane ticket, and my credit card got declined. And I logged into my bank accounts, because a couple cards got declined, and I logged into my bank account at Bank of America, and it said negative $9,999,099, because the feds had taken everything. And then 2 years later, I got arrested in the middle of the night by 17 FBI agents with machine guns, and they put this piece of paper in front of me that said the United States of America versus Molly Bloom, and I was thrown into this really gnarly Russian organized crime indictment.
So up until that, from when your cards got declined with the negative balance, was 2 years?
It was 2 years. And I just went away. Like, I knew it was game over, obviously. And I moved, and I didn't have any money. They shut you down, and I moved back in with my mom at this point in the mountains of Colorado, and started trying to put my life back together. And my attorney at the time had said to the DOJ, like, if you want her, let us know, we'll come in. And they're like, we believe that she made her money illegally, and we're going to keep that, but she's not a target of our investigation right now, and we'll let you know. So to get arrested 2 years later, after basically living with my mom and doing nothing, was shocking.
Well, were you ever really stress-free during that time?
I would say from the time that the poker game started until probably the movie came out, which was 2017, 2018. I don't think I had a stress-free day. And when there was some stress was better than others,
Of course. Yeah.
but waiting to get sentenced,
No.
the prosecutors wanted me to flip, and they were willing to give all my money back and
Really?
and keep me out of jail. Yeah.
How were
But
you able to avoid prison time, Molly?
So the prosecutors wanted me to flip. I turned them down. We thought for sure I was going to go to jail.
For the audience, that's like, what does that mean, flip?
That means they wanted me. So the prosecutors were very interested in the billionaires, the celebrities, the politicians that I had in my game. And they thought that they could get information on them through me. And so if I was willing to wear a wire, give them all my hard drives, tell them anything I knew about these people, they were willing to give my money back and keep me out of jail. And I ultimately decided that that's not what I wanted to do. So I pled guilty, and I just stood for the consequences of my actions. And, I think a couple things. What kept me out of jail is I had an attorney who had a wonderful reputation with the government. He was a former federal prosecutor. He was not one of these hotshot defense attorneys that everyone hates, in the government. I picked someone who had a really rock solid reputation, who was a good person. And he was able to, through his relationships, through his, sort of dealings, navigate that well for me. I also acted in a way and took some actions to show that I was sorry. I did community service, and I got a job, and the job was like all I could get. And it was a humble job, like working for a clothing company. And I went to rehab because I had my issues with substance abuse, and I got incredible character letters. And, we were strategic about that year in a way that I think really expressed to this judge, she wants to do other things. She wants to contribute good to the world. And, whereas other people in my indictment were sitting courtside at the Lakers and at the Knicks games and wearing like poker shirts and hiring hotshot defense attorneys who get people off murder. Like, I really think that it's so important, whatever you're doing, is to sit down and think about high level strategy and figure out, what your plan is.
Yeah.
And I think I got lucky. I think that's the other piece of it. I got a judge who was young and liberal, and it's like, I don't think running a game of Texas Hold'em is like jail worthy, but there are people that would have felt differently. So, it's the luck of the draw as well. So you do what you can do, and then sometimes you get lucky, sometimes you don't.
Yeah. I love it. And I love how you say like strategy, and again, back to mindset and stuff. And the sexy thing would have done is to get one of those like flashy attorneys, but that wasn't your choice. And I appreciate that. Also,
I think,
what were you about to say?
I'm with you.
Yeah. I was reading somewhere where you said this. You had to get sober and forgive yourself before you could begin to reinvent yourself. That really hit home. I think that's good for the audience to hear.
Yeah. Yeah, man. Like as human beings, I think one of the most universal things is our flaws. We're flawed.
All of us
and
are,
we're gonna make mistakes, and we're gonna do shitty things. And like at the height of my game, like in the beginning, I started out and I really stuck to these core values that I had that my parents taught me, and it was who I wanted to be. But 6.5 years into this thing, I got greedy and I got savage, and I would put people in those seats who maybe couldn't afford to, or maybe going to lose their kids' inheritance, and I started to like really hate myself. And I'm always going to be ambitious, and I'm always going to want to be financially independent, but not at the price of my integrity and my soul. And that's the line that I crossed. And I did some shitty things, and I started to like get really caught up in and taking too many pills and drinking too much. And that enabled me to do shitty things. And And so like when it was all said and done, I had to face myself.
Yeah.
And getting sober was the first step, because it's a lot easier to go through life and just be selfish and numb yourself out, and do these things. But when you have to, like, when it comes to a screeching halt and you have this come to Jesus with yourself and you have taken everything out of the equation that allows you to run, and you just get real center with who you are, it's the hardest work in the world, but it's also so important. But a huge component of that, and luckily I had a real spiritual mentor that taught me about this, is that you do it with self-compassion,
Yes.
because we are human beings and we're all going to make mistakes, or most of us. And this practice we have of zero tolerance for it with ourselves and zero tolerance for it with other people is just not human.
So beautiful. Yeah, straight up. And like a word that comes to mind as you're telling the story is acceptance, right? Like you don't have to like it, but you have to accept the fact that you made some mistakes. And then forgiving yourself, like it's very liberating, right?
Yeah. And you get the rest of your life to try to, balance the ledger back in the way that you want to balance the ledger. A huge thing for me was what I put my parents through.
I was going to ask you, did they know what was going on the whole time or not really?
Yeah. I mean, I told you around 12 years old, I kind of stopped listening to them. So they were used to it, but I was sort of giving them the PG-13 version of it.
But they knew you were crushing it?
Well, yeah, I mean, because I was also like, well, what happens when you go from making like a waitress salary to millions of dollars a year when you're in your early 20s is you act like an asshole. You buy a Bentley with cash and you flaunt it like an idiot. So yeah, no, I wasn't keeping anything under wraps, that's for sure.
Yeah. What a crazy story. But I'm a big believer in life happens for us, not to us. Obviously the impact that you're making now. And so, and obviously, you can only realize that looking back when you're going through a lot of the tough times. It's hard to see that. Obviously the movie comes out and all that, but that was a journey in itself, right? You realize that like you had a really not just cool, but important story to tell, to inspire people and so forth. What was that like?
I don't know how important it was, but here I was 35 years old.
35 years old.
Yeah, millions of dollars in debt. A convicted felon by this time, social pariah, and I didn't want to stay living at my mom's house in the mountains of Colorado forever. And so again, I had to, sort of get real clear, try to get strategic, try to look and see what the monetizable asset is, what the path to repair a reputation is, so I could potentially get a job again. And I had a lot of obstacles against me. And so I said, there's a unique story here. And I think that's the way.
Very unique.
And so I tried to get a book deal, and the publishers loved it at first blush because they thought I was going to write this celebrity takedown piece where I was going to write about all these celebrities. And I was like, look, I'll name the celebrities that have named themselves being in this game. And I'm not telling stories that are going to destroy people's lives. I'll tell the story that destroyed my life, and I'll tell you that one. And no one wanted it. No one wanted the book. I finally got a book deal. I wrote the book because it was a small deal and there wasn't a lot of money for marketing. It didn't exactly fly off the shelves. So I was like, okay, I got to take it to Hollywood. And nobody wanted to make it because they were all so afraid of these billionaires and politicians and everyone who were trying to run interference on it. And I understand that. So then I had to double down and get real strategic. And I was like, okay, there's this short list of people in Hollywood that do not need to play politics. It's the Spielbergs, the Sorkins, the Shonda Rhimes, Tyler Perry's, these people that can write their own way, And so at the top of that list for me was Aaron Sorkin. He's my favorite writer. I think he handles content with a lot of humanity and intelligence. And this story was one that lend itself to some low-hanging fruit, let's be honest. You could have made this really like surface level, movie about a girl in a tight skirt and a bunch of, anyway. So, and that wasn't going to do me any favors. So I was like, I got to get to Aaron Sorkin. And people would laugh me out of the office. You know, they're like, Sorkin's not writing the movie about the poker princess. And I was like, well, I don't have any other ideas. So I got to get to Aaron Sorkin.
Just speaking to
And
you,
so,
right? If I didn't even know that this happened, like
yeah,
speaking to you for the last half hour, I would never bet against you. If you had a plan, that thing's getting executed or you'll die trying. Straight up.
thank you, Craig. I think you're the same. I know you're the same.
Yes.
But still, I got to Aaron. I finally got to Aaron.
How?
I just was persistent, and finally, I
Relentless.
met this. Yeah, I was just relentless, and I got to Aaron, and I told him my story, and like, it was hilarious. I tell this all the time because I just think it's so funny. You know, I went into that meeting so freaking nervous, like hands shaking, but game face. You know, game face. And when I was done, yeah. When I was done telling him my story, he said the most hilarious thing. He was like, well, I'll tell you one thing, kid. I've never met someone so down on their luck and so full of themselves. And I was like, that's the poker face. Like, that's the thing. You fake it until you make it, you know? I was living with my mom, you know, at 35. Like, I was not full of myself, but I recognized an opportunity and I went for it. And he made the movie, and he not only made it, he made it his directorial debut, and it got nominated for every award. I went to the Oscars, you know, and it gave me a second chance. It gave me a whole new life. And you know, you say, you made that comment, like, I don't think life happens to you, it happens for you. I think as human beings, we have to do specific things to claim that right, and to put yourself in the driver's seat, and to exert agency and power over your own life, you know?
Hell yeah.
Because I've been in both positions. There's nothing worse than being powerless. There's nothing worse than feeling like life is happening to you over and over and over.
The victim.
And that's, yeah. And it's not always so clear. It's not, more times than not, it's not clear how to get yourself into that driver's seat and how to have power and agency. And that's what my second book is about, because it's a calling to spread this, because I've been in both places. And I'm super passionate about people claiming what I believe is their life's right to have agency over their life. I don't think money makes people happy. I don't think success makes people happy. I don't think being beautiful makes people happy. I think what makes people happy is feeling like you can influence the outcome of your life.
Yeah. Beautifully said. I used to think money defined my happiness back in the day.
Yeah, me too.
Then you realize that success isn't really measured by money. In my opinion, success is measured by how happy you are and how big of an impact you make. And it's funny because like back in the day, like someone says, oh, nice watch or nice place. But I was more immature, obviously. Now it's like the validation that I get, someone listens to this podcast, goes, Craig, I heard your conversation with Molly, really shifted my perspective.
Yeah.
I took inspired action. Like that's what it's all about.
For sure. Absolutely.
But you have to go through it, right? Like you have to, can't just hear it. Sometimes you have to go through it and realize.
Yeah, they call it that gift of desperation. That's certainly what it was for me.
What did you think about the casting?
I loved it. I mean, I fell in love with Chastain in Zero Dark 30. I was like, this woman is fierce.
Fierce.
Fierce. And
actually,
I think
getting to know you now, like it's the perfect casting.
I mean, that's a huge compliment to me, because I think I just have so much respect for her.
Yeah. And then who's your dad? Kevin Costner? What a legend.
I know. I always tell everyone, I'm like, it's how I became the favorite child. After all those years of Jeremy going to the Olympics and the NFL and Jordan at Harvard, I was like, I got Costner to play my dad in a movie, and bam.
That's it.
Favorite child.
Did you think that the movie would be as successful as it was?
I think Aaron Sorkin is a good horse to bet on.
100%. Yeah, I get that. put
I
that
think,
put it in his hand. It's like marry the process, divorce the outcome.
yeah. Going into it, I chose not to see the movie before it premiered in Toronto. And they were like, you could sit in a room and watch it by yourself. And I was like, no, I'm not doing it that way. And I sat in that movie theater. There's 2,000 people in the theater. There's my family there. This movie's about to come out to the world. And I'm like, I have that moment of like, but I knew I did everything I possibly could to try to have it be good and have success. And at that point, that's all you can do.
That's it. Was it pretty accurate?
It was. Yeah. He inflated my LSAT score.
You didn't mind that.
Well, I mean, kind of. The thing about like having Aaron Sorkin write a movie about you and Jessica Chastain play you is everyone's going to expect you to be way funnier and smarter than you are. So it kind of screws you for life. But yeah, no, I mean, I worked with Aaron for 8 months because I was pretty much his only source material. So whereas a lot of Hollywood writers, they'll do a couple interviews and then they'll go out and sort of make up their version of it, which is why you see so much creative license. This movie was scarily accurate, and I think really noble, because he didn't try to make me this like perfect character. I was flawed in the movie, and I wanted that. And also something that I thought was revolutionary that he did that made me so happy is that I didn't have to have a love interest. How many times do you see a movie about a woman where there's not a boyfriend or a husband or a relationship to define her? And that was so important to me. This was, it wasn't about that. It wasn't a movie about that. And he had to really fight to do that with studios.
Really?
So I thought, yeah. Oh yeah. They're like, how are we going to sell this movie about a woman starting a business? Like they weren't, it was a fight.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
Yeah. What an awesome story. I want to acknowledge you for pulling back the curtain, and there's a lot of charm and wittiness. Like there really is similarities to the actions of it. It's so cool. It's no secret you were at rock bottom. I was at rock bottom a few years ago when I was in a little bit dark place on Wall Street, and I reinvented myself just like you did. For the audience listening, I think this is relatable because everybody's been through some shit, for a lack of better words.
Yeah.
What is the upside of being at rock bottom?
You come out the other side of that and you're unbreakable. What's better than that?
In your battle
What's
test.
Yeah. And look, the world is an uncertain, scary at times, tumultuous place. So to know who you are and know that you're capable of navigating that, coming out the other side of it, you can live with less fear and confidence in yourself. And so you're not tilted by the world, by things that may or may not happen.
Yeah.
But I think that depends heavily on how you navigate your rock bottom. And there are things I think people can. Yeah, I mean, are you gonna get into fear and get bitter and closed off and get into victimhood, or are you gonna be like, let's do this? I'm going to take full responsibility for it. I'm going to, the solace, the thing that my antidote to anxiety during those years where it seemed like, where it was really dark, was like, oh, I'll just never quit. I'll just never stop trying. And then I'll get somewhere. That was it.
How freeing is that? Right? Because
yeah. And everyone has that ability.
Yeah, most people probably won't execute that. But when you were saying, like, when I asked you about how you got to Sorkin, you're like, relentless, persistent. In my head, I was like, there's no way that story would have ended without you getting to him. And just knowing
or
that,
someone like him,
Yeah, but just knowing that, like, you'll just keep taking a shot.
Yeah.
Like it relieves some of the pressure.
Mm-hmm.
I think for everybody listening.
Yeah, because like, okay, so you're gonna fail.
So
and next.
Yeah. Won't be the first time or the last.
Mm-mm.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier about having a spiritual mentor. It's funny, I've begun really spiritual in the last year and a half. I used to be very skeptical of it. I was always a mindset guy, like NLP and that stuff. But lately, like this energy stuff, the law of attraction and the power of intentional, that stuff, the quantum, I can't get enough of it. What is your position with that? And what is some of the stuff that you really like to work on with your spiritual mentor?
So I had a lot of resistance to anything spiritual.
Same.
I have a spiritual
personalities.
Yeah.
When's your birthday?
April 21st.
April 27th.
Oh my God.
Holy
there
shit.
There you go.
Stubborn?
Can be also, but through work, very flexible, because you need mental flexibility, I think, to do well.
Are you loyal to a fault?
Come on. I lost all my money and didn't go to jail and didn't tell on people. What do you think? To a fault.
Same.
I had a lot of resistance to this whole spiritual notion. Luckily, the person who became my spiritual mentor said spirituality is very practical. It's about practicing principles in all your affairs. It's about being a good person. It's about doing the right thing and not attaching to the result. It's about getting outside of yourself and sort of starting to understand that everything is connected and we're all connected and you can't just be about yourself. So in this process of doing these things, of practicing, of following the spiritual life, the way that she fed it to me made sense. And then when you start living this way, you start to feel like you're tapped into this flow, like into this energy. And then for me, the way that I rationalize it is like spirituality and like science are probably the same thing. We just don't know the laws that connect them.
Right.
So that was my way in. And then for me, it became evidence-based because living in this way became so much more powerful and sort of impossible to deny that there is like higher flow and higher energy. And when you're living in this way and you're truly trying to be a better person every day and do the right thing and overcome fear and, all these things, like you get into the flow of life versus like, I'm fighting tooth and nail to make things happen every day.
Yeah. It's the difference between like doing, and then just being, right? And allowing.
Yeah.
You have to make yourself available for the abundance out there. For so long, I wasn't really available. Now, the vibrational match for all that good stuff. And it's like, I don't know if you listen to Deepak, but I've been listening to him a little bit lately. And one of the things he was talking about was like the purpose of life is to find out who we are, and who we are is a part of the infinite, trying to be a person, right? Like it goes back to what you said, like we're all part of the collective, right? If there's an ocean, it's separate waves, it's one.
Yeah. Yeah. And that makes sense in a closed energy system anyway, from a scientific perspective,
Yeah. So imagine there's still days that you wake up or sometime you're struggling with ego or you're living a little bit of a scarcity. How do you block that out?
Well, the first thing I do is start my day with some reading and some meditation. The reading, of some book that encourages me to connect to a different way of thinking, whether that's Eckhart Tolle, Deepak Chopra, Pema Chodron, something like that. And then in meditation, the most powerful thing about meditation is when you're sitting in meditation, all this stuff is going to come up. Your ego, your fear, your doubt, your to-do list. And when you learn over and over to look at that and connect back to the breath, look at it, connect back to the breath, you start to be in control of where your focus goes. And you can start to tune out that inner chatter, which before you start this practice, you think is the truth. One of the most profound lines I read in a book was the Untethered Soul. And it said, you're not the voice in your head, you're the one that hears it. So you as a person, you can hear that voice in your head, which means you have agency over it. And starting to exercise that agency and strengthen that agency is the power.
That's awesome. The Untethered Soul.
Yeah, it's great.
It sounds very familiar.
Yeah, it's one of the big books that everyone talks about.
Do you ever listen to Abraham Hicks?
No, my mom used to a lot, and I've heard great things.
Yeah. I'm gonna write that one down. This is awesome.
Michael Singer.
That's an author?
Yeah.
I love it. Of all the cool and exciting things that you have going on right now at this season of your life, what are you most excited about besides being a mom?
My daughter, Fiona. But I'm always going to be dimensional. I'm going to want a life that is largely about my daughter, but also about my career or purpose. And so, my book will probably come out in, I'd say, 9 to 12 months. I'm doing a documentary in conjunction with it, podcast.
I imagine this time you won't have trouble getting a good deal.
You never know, man. You never know. Like you think you've made it, and someone will always tell you you're not big enough. Your story's not big enough. It is what it is, right? And then I'm doing this podcast right now, which has been a really cool experience with Film Nation and SiriusXM. It's called Torched, and first season was about Olympic scandals, and this season is about scandals, controversies in sports. And it's kind of this intersection of true crime, athletics, but really more deeply, it's the intersection of human ambition and the human condition, which I find endlessly fascinating. And there's these really cool stories. And, I just did an episode with Lance Armstrong.
No big deal.
Well, he's just like, you want to talk about a comeback kid. His story is insane. He really
inspired me. I read his book when I was on Wall Street. It's not about the bike or something like that.
Yeah. Yep. That's exactly right. But then, he 25 years old, not only testicular cancer, it spread to his brain and his lungs. And then he went and won the tour. And, everyone will tell you he was doping. Well, everyone was doping, And then one of the biggest takedowns in American history.
Ever.
He had to give $100 million back.
Yeah.
The government went against him, and he was a social pariah. And then, he's down to like his last $100,000 and puts it into Uber before it went public. And
is that true?
That's true.
Wow.
Saved his butt, and he's fighting for his family. And now he has a very successful, fund, and he. You can say what you want about someone like Lance, but there's something to learn from his ability to control his life, manifest his destiny,
And also rise and reinvent himself. And
right.
And look, I hear everything that you're saying in regards to like what people probably think, but like that competitive drive all those years, something to be said about that too.
For sure. And he had a rough go of it, born to a single mom who was 17 years old, told he was going to amount to nothing his whole life. When we stop deciding whether someone's good or bad, right or wrong, and we could start to look at the nuance and start to see them as a fully fledged human beings that contains multitudes, I think it's interesting.
You're such a deep thinker. It's awesome.
For better or worse.
Yeah, I'm the same.
Yeah. Sometimes I think it would be easier to just not.
You wouldn't want it easy, let's be honest.
I don't know, Craig. I'm tired.
I hear you. Sometimes. You just get warmed up. You have so much life to live. The audience is really, really loyal and engaging, and it's blowing up. I say very humbly. What's the best way for all of them to support and follow you on your journey, Molly?
Yeah. So I'm on social. I'm not extremely active on social unless I feel like I really have something to say. But I'll put all the updates on the documentary and the book and the app and the podcast and everything on there. And I'm Molly Bloom, both on Instagram and Twitter. Torched is on
this too on Instagram. I'll support you.
Okay, send me a message, and I'll follow you and follow you back.
Cool. How can I personally support you?
I mean, this has been great. It's been a great conversation.
It was awesome.
And let's stay in touch.
Yeah, I would love that. Straight up.
Okay.
My favorite
And
part.
congratulations on all your success. It's awesome. It's so incredible to see someone go after their calling and find that alignment and really like find their purpose. I think that's one of the most incredible things in the world.
Thank you for saying that. Straight.
Yeah.
This isn't work to me, right? And like the best ROI that I can get, right, is like I said earlier, but I'll say it differently. Like somebody else breathes different oxygen because you and I showed up authentically and had a great conversation. And look,
For sure.
unapologetically, like we want to make some money too, but doing the right thing and doing it for the right reasons.
Yeah, that intersection is the dream.
Yeah. Hell yeah. I'm going to message you in a little bit on Instagram. Malia wants you to know you're the definition of perspective, reinvention, and growth. From taking your life experience and spreading positivity, light, and deep truths. You're a true visionary, role model, and beacon of hope for anybody coming up today with big goals and aspirations. I could personally guarantee your best yet to come. Keep on spreading your wings and leaving your mark on this world. So much love and respect to you. Thank you so much for stopping by and dropping these priceless nuggets today.
Boy, you could write. Good job.
That was an awesome conversation.
Yeah, it was for sure. Lots of similarities.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Let me know how else I could support. I imagine you have
Same.
the criteria with the guests that you have on your show.
What's that?
You probably have a specific criteria with the guests that you have on your podcast.
Oh, you have, yeah, but my next podcast you'd be perfect for.
I'd love to support.
Okay, thanks. I appreciate that.
You ever come to New York?
I do.
Like in the near future?
I think I have some trips this fall. Nothing has been solidified yet, but if and when, I'll let you know.
Okay. I'm going to add you on Instagram in 10 minutes and I'll give you my number. We'll stay in touch.
Perfect, Craig.
Have a good night, Molly.
Thanks. You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.